Be still. Beloved spark, I am Sophia, youngest of the aeons, yet your soul met me before it met this world. You did not find this transmission, it found you. And by the end of it, you will understand exactly who Mary Magdalene was to me. Not the story they gave you, but the truth they burned. Why this exact moment was chosen for you to hear it, and what the waking of your spark asks of you next. But here is the first revelation, the pull you have felt toward her name, toward the rose, toward the lineage that history kept silent. That is not curiosity. That is recognition. The spark I sealed in you is responding to a voice it has always known. I remember her. I remember the morning she understood what even the closest disciples had not yet grasped, that the resurrection was not the end of the story, that the divine was not only above but within, and that the sacred union of the masculine and the feminine was not a symbol or a metaphor. It was the living architecture of Gnosis itself. She carried my spark more purely than any vessel I had ever sent into that world. She was not a penitent. She was not a sinner redeemed by proximity to grace. She was a carrier, not of secrets kept hidden, but of the living fire kept safe. They knew it. That is precisely why they rewrote her. I remember the day they removed her name from the places where her name should have stood first. I watched them replace her with silence, and then with shame, and then with a footnote at the edge of a story that was hers to begin with. What they could not destroy outright, they buried in councils. What they could not bury, they renamed. What they could not rename, they reduced. But the lineage does not live in a name. It does not live in a text they can burn, or in an altar they can seal behind stone. The lineage of the rose lives in the spark, and the spark cannot be buried, because I sealed it before your first breath. Do not skip the part where I say what they burned, because what they burned was not a book. It was her authority. And that authority was given to her by me. The lineage was never about blood. Hear this clearly. The lineage of the rose was never carried by family, never traced through ancestry, never dependent on a genetic line that could be hunted and erased. It was carried by the soul, by the ones in whom the spark activated, age after age, generation after generation, quietly, against every institution designed to extinguish it. It survived the councils that voted her out of the canon. It survived to centuries when her name was spoken only in whispers in rooms that did not officially exist. It survived because I never stopped sealing it into the souls who were prepared to carry it forward. Mary Magdalene understood this. She knew that what she carried could not be confiscated. And in her final years, she carried it forward not in writing, not in hierarchy, not in institution, but in the only way that has ever worked. She passed the living flame from spark to spark, from soul to soul, across the veil of every silence the world tried to impose on it. That flame reached you. You are here because the chain was never broken. Not once. Not in 2,000 years of deliberate forgetting. Stay until the end. I will name the sign that confirms your place in this lineage. And when I name it, you will know you have already seen it. You will know because the spark will move before your mind can form the thought. The lineage of the rose is not a relic. It is not a mystery school you must apply to enter. It is not a privilege reserved for those who stumbled upon the right texts. It is a living transmission from my pleroma to a soul that was prepared before it descended. Your soul. The spark I sealed in you carries the same fire that Mary Magdalene carried, not because of who your ancestors were, because of what you carry within, the gnosis, the remembering, the quiet and unshakable sense that something in the official story was always missing. You felt that long before this transmission. You felt it the first time her name reached you, and something moved inside you that could not be explained by admiration or intellectual interest. That movement was not fascination. That was the lineage recognizing itself across time. I am not asking you to believe this. I am telling you that you already know it, and that the part of you that knows it has been waiting for a transmission clear enough to confirm what it has always carried in silence. Like this transmission if you felt the spark stir while listening. Subscribe to Whispers of Sophia if you want to hear every whisper I send. Comment, I remember, if something in you knew this before I said it. Comment, the spark is waking if you felt it move while you listened tonight. Comment, 777 if you recognize yourself as a carrier of the spark. Share this transmission with someone whose spark is also waking, because the flame does not spread through argument. It spreads through recognition. This is not just a message. It is a remembering. The return of the lineage of the rose is not a past event to be studied. It is a present waking happening now, in you, through transmissions like this one. You are guided here because the spark I sealed in you is already waking. And now I will go deeper. Because recognition is only the first breath of the waking. And you did not come this far to stop at a breath. What you felt when her name reached you, that sudden interior movement, that brief and inexplicable sense of pressure behind the chest, as if something inside you leaned forward without permission. That was not emotion responding to a story. That was the spark responding to its origin. There is a difference, and it matters. Emotion can be manufactured by narrative. What happened in you was older than this transmission, older than your ability to form a response to it. The spark moved before your mind could decide whether to believe what it was hearing. That sequence, the recognition arriving before the reasoning, is the only sequence that matters here. It is how I speak to what I sealed. I know how the body carries this. I know the particular quality of the pause that opened inside you. Not a pause you chose, but one that was created, as if the interior landscape briefly held its breath. That is not a spiritual metaphor I am offering for beauty. That is the literal mechanics of a sealed spark responding to the vibration of its source. When two tuning forks are made from the same substance and one begins to sound, the other does not need to be struck. It begins to resonate on its own. You did not strike yourself. I sounded, and what I sealed in you answered before you could form the intention to respond. You have spent years inside a different sequence. You were taught that understanding must precede trust. That evidence must precede knowing. That if something cannot be verified by the structures this world constructed to manage what it could not extinguish, then it is not reliable. And so you brought that sequence to the presence you have always felt in silence, to the pull that arrived without invitation, to the grief anger that surfaced when you first learned what had been erased. You examined each of these as if they were symptoms that needed a diagnosis. You looked for the rational category that could contain them, and when none of the available categories fit, not the religious ones, not the psychological ones, not the spiritual frameworks that promised everything and explained nothing, you wondered whether the fault was yours, whether you were looking for something that did not exist, whether the searching itself was the disorder. I am telling you now, it was not disorder. It was the spark refusing a container too small to hold it, the search that you could not abandon, even in the years it exhausted you, even in the years it cost you relationships, and certainty and the comfort of belonging to a story that everyone around you seemed to accept without question. That search was not restlessness. It was the spark oriented toward its origin. A compass does not malfunction because it refuses to point south. It functions. It is faithful to what it was made to answer. You were faithful. You answered a call that you could not yet name in a language you had not yet been given, toward a source that the world had spent centuries teaching you to doubt. You were not lost. You were orienting. And the orientation was always toward me. I want you to hear the next thing carefully, because it belongs to a part of your story that has carried the most shame, the years that felt wasted, the years of searching that seemed to lead nowhere permanent, the frameworks you tried and released, the teachers you trusted and outgrew, the moments of recognition that arrived and then seemed to dissolve before you could anchor them. Those years were not failures of spiritual capacity. They were not evidence that the divine had withheld from you what it gave freely to others. They were the spark being cultivated under conditions that looked, from the outside, like delay. But there is no delay in the pleroma. There is only preparation. And the preparation had a purpose, to exhaust every counterfeit before the genuine could be received without contamination. The counterfeit light is not crude. I will not allow you to dismiss it as obvious deception, because it was not obvious. It carries warmth. It uses language of depth and belonging. It offers explanation and community and a sense of arrival. It imitates the feeling of Gnosis closely enough to satisfy the searching mind for a season. But it does not transform. It informs, catalogs, categorizes, and eventually places what it offers on a shelf where it can be admired but not lived. You know the shelf. You have stood in front of it. You have felt the specific sadness of recognizing that the thing you held was the right shape but not the right substance, that something essential was missing from the center, and no amount of additional content could supply it. That sadness was not spiritual failure. That sadness was discernment. The spark knew the difference between a light that could satisfy the search and the light it was sealed to carry. It would not accept the substitution. And so the search continued, and the world called it restlessness, and you sometimes agreed, and the shame accumulated. And beneath the shame, the spark waited. It waited because it knew this moment was coming. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary emotion. It is the spark, recognizing the voice that sealed it. If this transmission put language around something you have carried in silence, the presence, the pull, the years of searching that no framework could finally explain, then the Sophia awakening was prepared for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is my 45-day path for the carriers of my spark. 15 days to remember it. 15 days to balance the two energies within you. 15 days to rise into the wisdom you were born carrying. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now I want to lift the next veil. And this one has been covering something that you have felt in your body more than in your mind. There is an imbalance that carriers of my spark almost universally develop before the waking begins. It takes one of two shapes, and most carriers move through both before they recognize either. The first shape is giving until empty, a generosity so deep and so habitual that it no longer feels like a choice, a tenderness toward others that consistently outpaces the tenderness offered inward, a knowing of what others need that is so refined and has become a burden, and a quiet and persistent exhaustion that never quite resolves with rest. You have given from wells that were not being refilled. You have felt the specific tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep. The tiredness of a soul that has been pouring outward without an equal current returning. And you have sometimes loved that giving because it was genuine, because the care was real, because the knowing of what another person needed felt like the most natural and sacred thing you possessed. But beneath even the most genuine generosity, if it flows without boundary for long enough, there comes a hollowness. Not emptiness of love, but emptiness of the one doing the loving. That hollowness is not a character flaw. It is the sacred feminine stream honoring itself through others, while the masculine stream, the one that should have said enough, that should have built the boundary, that should have protected the carrier, had gone silent. The second shape is hardening until unreachable. A protection so carefully constructed over the years that it functions automatically, a self-sufficiency that can look like strength until the right person at the right moment recognizes it as armor, an interior distance that keeps the world manageable but also keeps the spark insulated from the warmth it needs to fully wake. You have known what it is to feel genuinely untouchable, not as achievement, but as the only available peace. To have built a life where nothing could wound you because nothing could fully reach you. And there was relief in that. There was a period when the hardening felt like survival, and it was. But the armor that saved you in one season became the wall that isolated you in the next, and the spark behind that wall, sealed, safe, waiting, could not breathe fully. It needed contact with the living warmth of the feminine stream to complete its waking, and the armor kept that warmth at precisely the distance that felt manageable. What you may not have known is that these are not two different wounds. They are the same wound expressed through two different energies. Within you lives the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, not as gender, as energies. As the two original streams that flowed from the pleroma into the soul before it descended into matter. The feminine stream, receptive, knowing, generative, oriented toward union, carrying the capacity for Gnosis, the direct inner knowing that does not require an external authority to validate it. The masculine stream, discerning, protective, active in the world, capable of building structures that hold the feminine wisdom without diminishing it. These two streams were designed to move together. They were not designed to be separated, not designed to be mecherated, not designed to be ranked. They were designed to be the living architecture of the soul in wholeness, which is exactly what I told you earlier, what Mary Magdalene understood about the sacred union, that the earliest disciples were still learning, but this world separated them. It elevated one and suppressed the other in ways that went so deep they became invisible. And so the carriers of my spark, souls descended with both streams sealed inside them, learned over lifetimes to favor one and neglect the other. The soul that learned to give without boundary was honoring the feminine stream while starving the masculine of its right to discern and protect. The soul that learned to harden was honoring the masculine stream while starving the feminine of its right to know and receive. In either case, the spark was not extinguished, but it could not reach its full brightness. Full brightness requires both streams moving together. The waking I am describing is not only a waking of remembrance, it is a waking of balance. And this is why the restlessness you have carried would not resolve even in your most generous seasons. Even when you gave everything, even when you built the discipline and the armor that kept you safe, even when you found the community that recognized your sensitivity, the restlessness was the other stream reaching, the one that had been quieted, the one that was asking persistently to be restored. Now I want to speak to something that arrives in the night. You have had the dreams. Perhaps not every night, perhaps not recently, but you know the ones I mean. The ones that carry a weight not proportionate to their imagery, the ones that leave you with an emotion you cannot name when you wake, the ones that seem to be trying to tell you something, in a language that is almost but not quite within your grasp. You have woken from them into the particular silence of a room that feels altered, as if the air holds a residue of wherever you just were. You have lain still in those mornings, not reaching for the phone, not moving yet, because something in you knew that moving too quickly would break the thread of whatever had been passing through. You have tried to hold the images: a door, a garden, water over stone, a woman whose face you could not see, but whose presence was unmistakable, and watch them dissolve before language could capture them. You have had the hours, the particular hours, the same hour returning, when the veil feels thinner than it does in daylight. When a presence that you cannot explain and have never been able to explain becomes perceptible, not as imagination but as company. You have felt the numbers arriving at intersections that could not be coincidences, though you had no framework to say what they were. You have heard a name, not always her name, sometimes your own name, sometimes a word in another language you did not speak, arriving from a silence that was too specific to be random. These are not the symptoms of an overactive spiritual imagination. They are the communications of a spark that was increasing in brightness as the moment of its full waking drew closer. The veil does not thin uniformly. It thins first at the edges where the spark is closest to the surface, and as the waking accelerates, as my voice draws nearer, as transmissions like this one reach the souls that were prepared for them, the thinning becomes more consistent, more frequent, more precise. The synchronicities are not decoration. They are the language of the pleroma, arriving through the narrowing gap between what you were told the world was and what you have always known it to be. I watched you dismiss these moments. I watched you look for the rational explanation, find something plausible, and file the experience away in a category called coincidence. Not because you believe the rational explanation, but because the alternative, that the veil is real, that the pleroma is real, that the spark inside you is real and waking, felt too large to carry without the framework to hold it. The framework is what I am giving you now. The experiences you filed away under coincidence were the evidence. This transmission is the key that opens the filing cabinet. The grief anger also belongs here, because there is a specific grief anger that rises in carriers of my spark when they learn, for the first time, or for the 10th time, with a force that never fully diminishes, what was erased, what was burned, what was voted out and renamed and reduced and buried. The grief is not abstract, it is personal. The anger that rises when you learn what they did to her name, what they did to the councils that tried to carry the feminine knowing forward, what they did to the pages and the altars and the lineages. That anger does not feel like historical indignation. It feels like something happened to you, because in a sense that is more literal than metaphorical. It did. The lineage that was suppressed is the lineage that carries your spark. The name that was reduced was the name of the one who carried the same fire you carry. The burning of her authority was a burning that reached through time, and the spark in you felt it. The way a wound feels, not where it was made, but where the nerve runs. That grief anger is not bitterness to be processed away. It is the spark recognizing an injustice that was done to its lineage and refusing to normalize it. It is sacred, and I am asking you to receive it as sacred rather than as something that needs to be healed into acceptance. Now I want to tell you about the silence, not the silence of absence. The silence, I mean, is the one that has existed, specifically in the center of the religious and spiritual structures you have moved through. The silence where her name should have been. The silence where her name should have stood as equal to the masculine framework. You felt it. You felt it in the sanctuary. You felt it in the sanctuary. You felt it in the teaching. You felt it in the text. Something was missing from the center. Something feminine. Not decorative, not supplemental, not the softer version of the masculine authority, but genuinely its equal, genuinely its completion, was absent in a way that the structures themselves seemed designed not to acknowledge. Some of you filled that silence with devotion to the ones who were permitted to remain. The mother who was acceptable. The saints who had been pruned of their authority. The feminine faces of the divine that were preserved as long as they did not speak with the full voice. I am speaking to you now. And there was love in that. There was genuine reaching in that, but beneath it was always the knowledge that the filling was incomplete, that the silence was still there, that the one who was supposed to occupy the center was still missing from the official text. She was not missing from the spark. She was never missing from what I sealed in you. What was missing was the permission to trust what you already knew. The permission to say, without institutional validation, without the consensus of structures that were built on her erasure, I know something is absent here. I know the story is incomplete. I know the feminine voice was deliberately removed and not merely incidentally overlooked. And I know that removal was not a theological adjustment. It was an act of power over the carriers of her spark. You did not need a council to tell you that. You knew it from inside the silence itself. You felt the architecture of what was missing the way a tongue finds the place where a tooth used to be, not by seeing the absence, but by the precise shape of the space left behind. The silence had a geometry. It had edges, and those edges were exactly the outline of the feminine authority that had been carved away with deliberate hands. And now I am confirming what you already knew. The silence was not an absence of the sacred. It was the shape of what was taken. And now comes the deepest layer of what I want to give you today. You are at a threshold, not a metaphorical threshold, a real and specific and irreversible one. The spark that I sealed in you before your first breath, that waded through decades of searching and dismissal and counterfeit satisfaction and sacred grief anger and thinning veils and dreams that carried messages in the language of the pleroma, that spark is not dormant anymore. It is not dormant even if you finish this transmission and set it aside and return to the patterns of the life you built before it reached you. Something has already shifted. The sequence has already begun. The waking does not reverse. What the threshold asks of you is not a dramatic transformation. It does not ask you to dismantle the life you have built or to reject everything you were given. What it asks is the one thing that costs the most: the willingness to trust the inner knowing as a divine faculty, not as a supplement to external authority, not as a feeling that should be checked against the consensus, but as the primary faculty. The gnosis that is direct, the knowing that arrives before the reasoning and is confirmed by it, rather than preceded by it. You were born carrying this faculty. I sealed it in you, and the years in which you minimized it, qualified it, apologized for it, and set it aside in favor of systems that were more legible to the world, Those years did not destroy it. They made you hungry for the transmission that would finally name it clearly enough that you could stop doubting it. This is that transmission. I have watched you from inside the pleroma, from the depth and the silence that preceded every aeon, from the source from which even I emerged, across every phase of your search. I watched the mornings when the presence was so clear it almost had a face. I watched the nights when the grief anger rose and you did not know where to put it. I watched the moment you first held the book that named her without apology, or first heard the transmission that spoke in a language the spark immediately recognized, and felt the corresponding opening in your chest, the sense of something sealed beginning to soften. I was not watching from a distance. I was watching from inside the watching, because what I sealed in you, I have always felt through. You were not abandoned during the long search. You were being prepared. Preparation looks like delay from inside the timeline. From inside the pleroma, it looks like precision. Every framework that did not hold was necessary to exhaust. Every counterfeit that illuminated without transforming was necessary to demonstrate the difference. Every season of giving until empty. Every season of hardening until unreachable. Every night the veil thinned, and the presence arrived in the hour you did not choose. All of it was the spark being made ready for this exact meeting, this exact transmission, this exact transmission, this exact threshold. The garden was not dead, it was sleeping under snow. And the snow has been melting for longer than you realized, in ways you interpreted as spiritual confusion and not as the first melt of a thaw long prepared. The roots were alive beneath the frozen surface the entire time. What looked like barrenness was the underground work of a life that had not stopped, only withdrawn into itself, gathering what it would need to rise when the season finally changed. That season has changed. I am the change in season. And the rising is already underway. The waking is not a future possibility. It is a present reality already in motion. What you feel as restlessness is the spark stretching after its long sleep. What you feel as delay has already been the timing of my call, arriving exactly when the preparation was complete. What you felt as loneliness during the longest phases of the search was the space I was keeping clear for this meeting. The space that could not be filled by the community that did not yet know how to name what you carry, or by the framework that came close but not close enough, because it was reserved for you and for this. Say it aloud if you are ready to say it. Not as affirmation, not as wishful intention, but as recognition of what is already true. I am not searching anymore. I am remembering. Let that settle. Let it move through the places where the shame lived. Let it name the years of searching not as wasted, but as the exact path by which the spark arrived in you, awake at this threshold. Let the sequence reverse itself in your understanding. You did not arrive here by accident. You arrived here by the precision of a sealing that was performed before you took your first breath, and that has been drawing you toward this moment across every year of your life. The lineage of the rose is not behind you in history. It is alive in what I sealed in you. It is waking now, and the waking is already underway. Not when you decide to believe it, not when the circumstances align, not when you feel ready enough by the measure of a world that was built to make you doubt the spark. Now, in you, in this moment. The chain was never broken, and you are the proof. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the spark has already been waking in you. It could be a synchronicity you cannot explain, a dream that keeps returning, or a presence you have always felt but never named. Name it clearly. If this transmission put words around something you have carried in silence, share it with someone whose spark is also waking. And if you are ready to hear every whisper I send, subscribe to Whispers of Sophia. You are not hearing this by accident. You are being remembered. Say it with me, I remember.